lots of people. Let's talk now to the political reporter for the Daily Mail, Victoria Churchill, on this. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us this evening on The Late Show Live. Good to see you. So yesterday, when President Trump said in the Oval Office, Europe has to get a grip on this situation, you are suffering from an invasion, it seemed inflammatory, but when you see these pictures, is he right?
Well, I think that these mirror images that we saw here in the U.S. before President Trump took office, he shepherded the idea that his administration has pretty much made illegal immigration non-existent of people coming into this country by shutting down the border. And I think the Trump playbook, even though people might not want to follow it just because it's attached to his name, when it comes to enforcing borders, there may be some lessons that European leaders can learn from what the Trump administration is doing. Now, when you look at immigration enforcement within the country, that's some things where I think he's had some justifiable criticism of how, ICE agents and CPB agents are conducting themselves in the country. But I think at the border itself, there's a lot that can be learned.
And it starts with will. It starts with the fact that President Trump came in with the political will to make change and make it happen. Do you see any sign that the will to close down the borders in Europe is starting to develop? The EU had a vote just recently, didn't they, where it appears that they are going to become a little bit more muscular in terms of turning people away?
I think we are seeing that will develop. Of course, as we know, post-Brexit, Britain and the UK are not part of Europe, but I think just seeing that even more left-leaning governments are willing to embrace these policies is a sign that this is not just something that is confined to the right, whether that's the American right or the global right. Immigration is something that President Trump talked about a decade ago when he was running for president in 2015, 2016. And so I think that was part of why the immigration issue, at least here in America, got branded as a right-wing issue. But I think when you see left-wing governments want to take up the issue, it gives a signal that, border security is not limited to just the right, and that a country is changed when you have people, particularly unvetted people, that are able to come into a country, stay pretty much indefinitely in a lot of these cases. Immigration takes a while, right? That's what I always like to say when I talk about this issue. Coming from a personal perspective, it took my family 11 years to get citizenship in the U.S. And, some people it can take as little as 5 or 6 years. Some people it takes longer. It is a grueling and arduous process, but it's there for a reason, to make sure that the people that are actually in the country are there to be to the benefit of the country and its citizenry and not to the detriment.
And the leader of Kuwait, he has wanted the Spanish government to declare an emergency, and Pedro Sanchez said, no, it isn't an emergency. Is there also a sense, do you think, Victoria, that we know that particularly Spain actually has an aging population? They do need more young people to prop up their economy, at least they do while they've got some jobs before AI takes them all. I wonder whether the willingness is there because they still believe that this is economically viable for them and in fact positive.
Well, I know that when you look at the U.S., the birth rates are definitely of a concern, and I think that happens to be the case in most developed nations across the world. And so, when you talk about things like propping up social programs, which Europe has a lot more of than we do here in the U.S., that is definitely a concern of who is going to pay. And so if you have less people going out, having jobs, paying taxes to even support that aging population, you do have to get people from somewhere. There is definitely measures that the Trump administration here in the U.S. has taken to encourage people to have families, saying that babies, for example, are going to be given investment accounts from the day they're born to kind of make sure that everybody has access to markets and economic growth that we're pushing here in the U.S. But you have to still be having babies to sustain that. And so if other countries aren't willing to make that push, they're not going to be as successful. But this is a problem not only in the U.S., but also even in Europe and even in Asia. That's a big problem.
Yeah. Okay, Vic, thank you. So good to see you. Victoria Churchill there from the Daily Mail, based here in Washington, D.C.